We're going to begin here at 5:30 with Decision 2024. We're just about a half hour away from Republican Florida Governor Ron DeSantis talking about his run for nomination for president. Within just the past couple of hours, he officially filed the paperwork, but he's going to make the long-awaited announcement on Twitter within the next half hour or so. It'll be in a conversation with that social media company's owner, Elon Musk. DeSantis' wife, Casey, actually kicked off the campaign a bit early, though, with this video.
They call it faith because in the face of darkness, you can see that brighter future. A faith that our best days lay ahead of us. But is it worth the fight? Do I have the courage? Is it worth the sacrifice? America has been worth it every single time.
Even though up until now DeSantis hasn't been an official candidate, he's really been the only Republican showing up in most national polls as a potential contender against former President Donald Trump. But what about the race specifically here in New York? Joining us live to discuss is Calabrese. He is a two-on-your-side Republican political analyst, one of our favorite guests. Carl, we appreciate you taking some time for us here. And I do want to start with the state of the race here in New York. And we'll show our viewers this. The most recent Siena College poll from last week, again, looking just at New York, shows Republicans still view President Trump favorably, nearly 2-1. But the poll also asked if you would support him or somebody else, and we're showing here a solid majority still picking the former president. But among the third or so of people who want somebody else, DeSantis got the highest number of them, 28% preferring him. It's double the next closest, which is former Vice President Mike Pence. So help us understand, as you see it, Carl, the state of the race here in New York.
Yeah, it's obvious from that poll, Michael, that right now, anyways, New York State Republicans are solidly behind Donald Trump. Not only that, but when you look at the breakout of different demographic groups, even women, Republican women, had Trump with 67% support. That's kind of surprised me, but there's no question that if the election were held today, a primary election held today, Donald Trump would do very, very well in New York State. Now, obviously, we really haven't had a race. I mean, the number one contender has always been Ron DeSantis until proven otherwise. He's not been in the race. So Trump has essentially had an open field, and he has really maximized that open field. His PAC, called Mega America, has spent $15.3 million attacking Ron DeSantis while only spending $1,500 to promote Donald Trump. And those attacks have really taken their toll. If you think back after the November election, where Ron DeSantis just had a complete Republican sweep in Florida. He won by 20 points. He delivered both houses of his legislature to super majorities for the Republicans. He helped deliver congressional delegations. He's had a very, very successful agenda in the legislative session. His numbers were sky high in November and December. In fact, some polls showed him actually beating Donald Trump. But then after that, Donald Trump began this campaign, this negative campaign, and DeSantis pretty much stayed silent. And, you know, there's an old rule in politics, never let any shot go unanswered, because if you do, you allow your opponent to define you before you define yourself. And consequently, we now see upwards of a 30-point gap between Trump's numbers and DeSantis. We'll see what happens now that he's in the race, that he can actually start to fight back, and we'll see if that begins to move the needle.
So, Carl, there is talk about New York Republicans moving the presidential primary here up to April 2nd. That would move it up, I think, about 4 weeks. Do you think that's going to happen here, and what will be the significance of that? I mean, New York has 91 delegates. It's not the biggest state in the country, especially in terms of Republicans, more Democrats here. But do you see New Yorkers having a real voice in deciding this, or by April 2nd, is it going to be over?
Well, certainly if it's a usual date, it's too late. April could still be in play. We don't know. Right now, with DeSantis, we're up to 7 Republican candidates. We still have Mike Pence, who everyone expects to announce. Chris Christie is toying with the idea. Glenn Youngkin might be interested. There's some other Republican governors, Kristi Noem, for example, Chris Sununu, who might get in. So we could end up having double-digit number of candidates in the Republican primaries. And that really complicates things, because now you're dividing up the vote, the anti-Trump vote, and Trump piles up delegates early. And so, depending on how many candidates get in, how many stay in past the first few primaries. That's critical, because what happens is, it's easy to get in, but if you don't start showing results at the polls in the early primaries, your financial contributions dry up and you're essentially done.
Carl,
So
I've only got yeah, I've got less than a minute.
The field winnows.
Yeah, less than a minute left here, but I want to ask you about, New York Republicans are often seen as more moderates, especially compared to some of the deeper red states. Ron DeSantis, you mentioned his success in Florida, but with issues like the abortion ban, we just heard about the NAACP issuing a travel advisory to go down there. Do you think his politics moving to the right will hurt him should he become the nominee and then need to get people in the middle?
Well, it probably won't hurt him in the primaries, because who votes in Republican primaries? The Republican base, which is very conservative, exception being New York State, for example. New York Republicans are much more liberal than the nationwide Republican base. But what DeSantis did in Florida during this legislative session, with all of the conservative boxes he checked off, will certainly help him. Won't hurt him at all in the Republican primaries. Let's see now if he can turn that into actual primary votes. I understand that he is going to spend $100 million in voter outreach, with the goal being that in the early primary states of New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada, that his volunteers knock on every Republican door 4 times, and in Iowa 5 times. That would be unprecedented. We'll see how that works out in the polls, and if it begins to move voters in his favor.
And more on this, of course, coming up on NBC Nightly News at 6:30. Republican political analyst Carl Calabrese, always a pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.